Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Confidential Live that we do every Friday, most Fridays when we're not doing client travel. I'm Kyler Cheatham. I'm honored to be your host today, joined by Adam Cheatham. And the format of this live is super informal, and we kind of talk about what we've been seeing in the marketplace over the last couple of weeks. And today we're going to kind of go over going back to the basics. There's lots of noise going on about what you need to do to remain competitive, especially around new technology. And we've seen, with our client work and just the community we are in, this rush to buy and purchase new technology, spend a lot of budget on a system we may or may not need, or we may or may not understand. So today, we kind of want to take a step back, look under that hype curve, and decide how you choose the best strategies and implement those within your business, whether it be technology or other things. So before we kind of get into that conversation, we love to hear from the audience. It's always great to hear your insights as well. So if you could drop in where you're joining from. I see some of you are already doing that, which is so awesome. And please join the conversation. We love to hear your insights and your questions as well. This is certainly a very relevant topic across verticals, across industries right now, right? Um, Also, if you're tuning in after we're done live, we do go back in and answer all comments. So feel free to do that. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and all other social channels. This turns into a LinkedIn podcast that we release weekly. So definitely feel free to follow us there. With that, good morning, Adam. How are you today?
I'm doing all right, no complaints. It's a beautiful Friday morning in Grand Junction. Welcome to everybody who's joining us wherever you are. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
I know, all global audience, which we're super grateful for. So, Adam, do a quick intro of what you do here at the Confluential, and then tell us a little bit about kind of this race to implement something: AI pilots, ERP migrations, workflow automation, all the things.
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, my name's Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of the Confidential. My background is in enterprise technology of all different kinds, whether it's ERP, CRM, MES, AI, architecture, whatever you want to call it. And I always take a perspective of this conversation from the point of view of the business, right? When we think about technology and how we use it, excuse me, and what it is we're trying to gain from it, generally has to do with something along the lines of we need to do better as a business. We seek
Mhm.
to create more gains as a business. So if we think about technology as an enabler of that, we can kind of strip out some of the hype, the overworked consulting jargon, and all of that stuff to
Mhm.
focus on what a purpose is. And that purpose is something that we like to chase with intent and say, I am intentionally going to
Mhm.
achieve this with these programs. And then that way you have a technology idea or a technology implementation that is fit for purpose and that
Mhm.
you can work through with that level of intent to be able to accomplish goals that you actually seek to accomplish as opposed to just hoping that something goes well.
Yeah.
Um, when I think about today's conversation, you don't need better tech. You need something different than that. It's generally an organizational conversation where you you have to have your house in order to use tech effectively. And if you don't, it just ends up being a waste of money. And I think that one of the things that stands out the most to me about this rush to implement something, anything, before somebody else does it, um, today, ChatGPT 5 is out, right? If you ask
Yes.
Elon Musk, Grok 4 was smarter than that two weeks ago. But it's the competition is certainly feverish on the AI side of things. But what I think that does is it actually buys people time, right?
Mhm.
Why implement something today when 5 is coming out soon, or when 6 is coming out soon? That pace of innovation actually allows you to be in less of a rush to do the first thing you possibly can, and focus on more on finding the right timing for you as opposed to the right timing for the market, because timing the market never works. You should work on things when you're ready to go. And if you get that type of a mindset brought into it, I think you'll be a whole lot more happy with the results that you find.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that comes back to the basics here. And I wonder if we can just kind of set the stage. Why do you think that businesses have started to so blindly trust technology that they're willing to spend all of this time and budget into something that they don't completely understand? Why are they losing those basics, due diligence fundamentals? Um, I wonder if you could kind of just give us your why to that, so that we can start the conversation of like what's actually going on before we dig into the real tech.
Yeah, so for me, I think companies are doing that because they're worried about getting left behind. They have a fear of missing out. Yeah. If I don't do it, somebody else will do it first, and if I don't do it first, then all of the gains are gone, right? So if if you do it second, that's fine. If you do it third, that's fine. So that's really an interesting thing to think about.
I'm laughing because our puppy is in Adam's office. Obviously, there's like a background
She's digging in
complete
the chair.
craziness that's going on
She's
there.
trying to
But
make a nap.
yeah,
Um,
she's a boxer puppy, and if you know, you know. Really any puppy, you know, right?
so
So I think, that's an interesting piece to it. And I know we're getting lots of questions here, but I want to turn to the audience and say, why do you think that we've started blindly trusting technology, or have we started blindly trusting technology? Is this a new thing? Have we always done it? And this race to get forward, what are you seeing with your community, your clients, your organization, and how is that working? So a lot of why we wanted to have this conversation today is just things that we see in the marketplace when we're talking to either our clients, when we're speaking on panels, when we're doing all of these different things. Everyone's first question is like, what's next with tech? And really the question you should be asking yourself is, what's next for my business? Innovation isn't the
mm,
same for everyone. It's unique as your own DNA as two different people, right? And the job of the technology leadership is to really assess with whomever they're serving, whether it be their own organization or a client, to figure out what that actually means. I think the interesting piece of when we're pulled into an implementation, a lot of times we aren't interested if they're buying new technology or not. We're interested in the fact of, are they ready to buy technology or not? And a lot of times we work with our SI partners, that's the same thing. They kick it back to us because there's not enough readiness there for them to do any good work. We prep the readiness. We go back to the SI or the vendor when they're actually ready to do the work that the vendor needs them to do. And so we have this kind of front row seat to looking at balancing the hype and FOMO with reality. And I think it's interesting to kind of move to this comment from Jason here. Thanks so much for joining. Budgets, cloud technology, digital natives, executive leadership age out, FOMO, consumerism of IT is in full effect. And so kind of break this down. First, I want to start with the executive leadership, because I think that's an interesting piece that we're at right now. We are looking at a new wave of executive leaders, but we still very much have, a Gen X or a boomer generation of executive leaders that have zero idea of this digital literacy. Not that they're not brilliant people, right? They just have never been in an industry that has been so rapidly changing. So talk to us a little bit, because you work directly with the executives, about what you're seeing on the executive level around kind of this FOMO, right?
that aging out of executives is, I think, is causing a lot of excitement. Yeah, it's, when the old guard turns over to the new guard, it's generally turning over to folks who actually grew up with the internet, right? Some of us remember what a dial-up modem is, but I would suspect that if you played that noise for certain, generations, they'd be like, "What is that disgusting thing in my ears?" And that the younger generations that are more experienced with technology and the speed of it, I think have a greater affinity for chasing it.
Mhm.
Um, there's a greater distrust for technology in the older generations, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to chase it quickly. Again, I actually have no problem with chasing technology quickly. I'm not trying to infer that you shouldn't try to
Mhm.
get on board as quick as possible. What I am inferring though is don't jump before you know where you're headed,
Yeah.
right? And where you're headed should be based on what your capacity is for being able to support what happens when that technology works, because it'll work the way it's supposed to, but the way it's supposed to may not be very well aligned with what it is you think it's going to do. So that executive leadership side of things is about having realistic expectations and a good strategy for setting the path ahead and knowing what we want to do with this. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
For me, the executives that are having the greatest effect with technology have that type of vision in saying
Mhm.
this is where we're headed, this is what we're going to do, and this is how technology is going to fit into it. And that's the key, right? So when you start talking about things like the OPEX budgets and the link to cloud technologies that are all subscription based at this point, right? What are we going to spend this extra money on? These are um, essentially become fixed costs that weren't necessary before. Especially when you start thinking about on-prem versus in the cloud, the subscription becomes something that it will come every month and it will go up every month.
Mhm.
Um, Depending on your contract, maybe every year, but it's going to continue to go up as we think about this. And rushing into that for fear of missing out is not the right way to do it, because all you'll do is you'll end up you sure won't miss out on some things.
Like the
You'll be
like
able to commiserate with those who
yeah.
also blew it alongside you. And as you get into the weeds on it, having that strategy in place and having that plan in place with purpose and intent is really how you are able to separate the noise from the actual results.
Absolutely. And so on that level, how do we balance executive vision with those over visionary founders that are, we have to be the company of the future type of thing, or the over vision where we're, trying to implement a technology that our business is not ready for it, whether it's the people, the operations, the process. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that the best example that I have that comes to mind right now, and kind of pulling this together in a little bit more of a story, is the Titan sub, right? That imploded on its way down to the Titanic. Um, that's a scenario where you have a visionary CEO
Hmm.
who is taking trips down to the Titanic in a new submarine that he developed.
Hmm.
Uh, the more specific thing on this is that he developed the hull of this submarine made of carbon fiber as opposed to solid metal, and he had a wide variety of folks who were telling him this is unsafe. The sheer nature of carbon fiber, and the fact that it is fibrous as opposed to solid,
Hmm.
creates a massive risk. We are seeing that these types of things, from a scale perspective, fail at 2,000 feet, let alone 12,000 feet of
Hmm.
depth. And they were all very specific about why this was going to fail. He did all of the research, he asked all of the right questions, and he completely ignored the results for the sake of being the one that had the carbon fiber hull to go down to the Titanic. He's
Mhm.
chasing these things that are unrealistic, obviously, and he was proven wrong quite catastrophically.
Mhm.
The biggest tragedy in this, of course, is that he didn't share that information with the folks that he took with him, and he cost their lives
Mhm.
by his own negligence. Um, but why I like this example for what we're talking about today is that's an example of a technology
Mhm.
application, carbon fiber, that is supposed to have the type of strength that steel and those types of things have in certain applications, that he did not plan properly for. He
Mhm.
had all of the information that he needed to be able to properly plan for it, and he went against that information anyway. As an
Mhm.
organization, you have to have all the proper information in place. And if you don't find it and listen to it, the results can be rather catastrophic.
Mhm.
Where if you're talking about new technology, what are we asking those questions of why are we doing this? What does our company seek to gain from this, and how?
Yeah, those
Asking those
why
questions
and how. Yeah,
into it. So
absolutely.
you think about the visionary CEO. There's a lot of that that's fantastic
Mhm.
energy, right? And every now and again you have somebody who completely ignores all of the everythings, and they have some type of genius intuition, like Elon Musk with Tesla. Is a great example of the I am going to create an electric
Mhm.
car that is going to disrupt the market, and it's going to make money, right? That was the idea, that
Mhm.
you could make money on an electric car before Elon Musk did it, was absurd. It was a pipe dream to actually make money without subsidies, and he disrupted that model by saying, not only am I going to make money, people are going to love driving these cars. They're going to be
Mhm.
fast. They're going to be fun.
Mhm.
And that vision that he had was certainly disruptive. But when you think about executives, for me, that are in that space, not all executives are Elon Musk, right? So
No.
what I would encourage most of them to do is get the information that they need and then trust their
Mhm.
intuition on it.
Yeah.
Sure, use AI to check your intuition too. I got no
Mhm.
problem with that,
Yeah.
but have your structure in place. And I think that that's the structure, the process, the actual assessment of where it is you want to
Mhm.
go and why, what you expect to achieve out of it is the key.
Yeah. And that's the fundamental step, right? Is understanding why you want to go somewhere and how you're going to get there. And a lot of that has to do with the fundamentals. So, which brings me to this question we have on LinkedIn from Mick, which is a great one. What habits would you consider mandatory when it comes to new tech or tech you already have? And I'll baseline answer this one and then hand it over to Adam to add to it, but I think the irony of this question is when it comes to mandatory, you have to understand the tech you already have. So many times in audits, we go in and find all of this technology that organizations didn't even know that they had. They didn't know they had the capability to do, or they were overspending on all of these different things. So I think you answered half your question here is you need to know what tech you have, and you'd be surprised how many people don't. So what would you add to this, Adam?
Temperance. That would be the number one, right? Like that you can go fast and have temperance at the same time. I've been listening to a lot of Huberman podcasts,
There you go.
and one of the things that he says on there is we go as fast as we carefully can.
Mm,
Archer, of course, loves this scenario because, like, let's go faster. Like, we'll go as fast as we carefully can. So that's a great
mhm,
idea. But that concept of going as fast as we carefully can requires temperance, right? It
mhm,
requires our ability to say, what is the level at which we're moving too quickly? And that
mhm,
habit, I think, is something that you got to be able to really tinker with. speed up where you can, slow down where you can, where you have to, right? That applies to not just strategic execution, it applies to technology implementation as well, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you're moving too fast and you start to miss things, it's okay to slow down and
Mhm.
find them. You
Mhm.
don't want to be stuck in the perpetual slowdown where you lose momentum and you get stuck in this rut where somebody's telling you, well, what was going to be the end of 2025 is now the end of 2026. Actually, just kidding. It's going to be 2027. Before we go live on this, that's getting stuck in a rut that's slowing down. Like the pace of slowing down is de- we're decelerating at an increasing rate, right? So
Mhm.
at the end of the day, that being able to control your pace and know it, and being able to be focused on it, I think is the real key habit there, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes into this next question. And thank you all for these amazing questions. What role does what look, I want to do this one first. Sorry, Avery. You have two great questions. I want to make sure I get to the right one first. So, what are some examples of organizations' habits that drive results even without reducing introducing new tech? And this is a lot of times
Yeah.
what we come in and level set, right? Because they have automatically, we're a technology implementation company, they immediately want to talk technology, and they're always surprised when we say, well, cool, that's all great, but how do you do your job today? And they're like, well, we want to talk
Mhm.
about tomorrow, right? What we're going to do
Yeah.
tomorrow. So we can't get there without knowing what you do today. So tell us about some habits that you can do today as an organization. You don't need a fancy consultant, you don't need anything like that, to start setting the foundations for these good habits.
Figure out what technology you have, how you're using it, and how you can improve what you've already got, right?
Mhm.
Um, uh, Spoiler alert, nobody wants to implement ERP. Nobody wants to do that. Not even, I
I
would
do.
even venture to say system integrators and vendors don't want to. They're just in the business of charging money for that particular activity. So they want to sell it. They want to sell the implementation. They want to sell the software itself. They don't necessarily want to implement it because that's hard to do. It takes a lot of work. It's risk oriented. My suggestion first is to know what you have and what you can get out of it. And if you can't get anything else out of it, then start looking outwards. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that I love that is a movement that is gaining momentum and should gain momentum. It's been gaining momentum for 15 years. Let's be fair. Is the agile methodology, right? This isn't to say I have a preference of agile over waterfall, but what I do believe is if you have an ability to gain more value from your existing systems and increase the velocity of delivery, then you should do that. Agile makes a great combination with how do we take what we have and deliver incremental value by improving our existing systems. That's what I think is a good organizational habit that you can impart without implementing any new technology, just improving your existing technology. The other types of organizational habits, good solid training, right?
Mhm.
I'm 100% certain that there are folks on this that are listening to this podcast right now that have systems that do things that they have no idea.
Mhm.
Right.
Oh,
I
definitely.
didn't had no clue it did that. This is
Yeah.
why retraining is such an important thing, even if you're implementing new ERP or new systems in general. I completely forgot that it did that. And so going and tracing through that, retraining and those types of things is always a good idea as well. So that you have the how do I get more out of the tools that I have? How do I improve them to fit my needs more
Mhm.
effectively before I start thinking about replacing them?
Mhm. Absolutely. That is such a good answer. I have zero to add to that. I just took like a page of notes here from that answer, but that's amazing. Such good advice. I'm going to bring up a long one here from Jason, so I'm going to kind of summarize it for you. But what his comment says is there are powerful competing forces of disruption and distraction at play here, requiring delicate strategic balance. So true. IT strategy has de facto blended into the business, and risk adoption is on the rise. Strategy governance and risk conversations are so critical right now. And so, to kind of formulate this, I think this is the strategic balance of disruption versus distraction is what IT leadership is trying to navigate right now. How do they do that? How do you see them do that successfully in the marketplace?
What there's a myth in this that the business only knows the business and IT only knows IT. If you're in that scenario, well, maybe that's not a myth. Maybe that actually exists in some places. If
Mhm,
you're in that scenario, you have a broken organization because
mhm.
if the business only knows the business and doesn't know anything about systems, then they cannot possibly be responsible for figuring out how to use those systems more effectively. If IT
Yeah.
only knows systems and knows nothing about the business, how can they possibly deliver value on a consistent basis, right?
Mhm,
And what I think is the most important, delicate balance in what Jason is talking about here, at least for me, is the balance between how much of the business does IT understand and how
mhm,
much of IT does the business understand. And if the business understands too much of IT, they get wound up in trying to dictate what they want their solution to be, and that prevents IT from being able to creatively solve problems, right? This is where the idea that I have a problem statement, I need to be able to, um, I have too many problems coming in from a perspective of error rate in my data. I need to
mhm.
be able to reduce my error rates in data so that I can improve my output, which will then allow me to improve my scheduling capacity and will be able to increase throughput. If I am dictating how that must happen, I'm taking the keys away from IT and their ability to understand their systems in greater detail and provide a solution that maybe I didn't think of as the business. On the flip side of it, if the business comes with a complex scenario and says all of these things, I have too many errors in my data to be able to drive effective scheduling, and the IT has no idea what they mean by that. They can't possibly design a solution that fits. So that's
Absolutely.
the delicate balance that for me is important in
Mhm,
knowing how much of the business does IT need to know and how much
mhm,
of IT does the business need to know.
mhm,
And it's a good amount on both sides, right? So when we start thinking about um, that balance in this comment, and you start thinking about disruption versus
mhm,
distraction in this scenario comes from not knowing enough or thinking you know more than you do.
mhm,
And then assumption that we can achieve these things in the name of disruption.
mhm.
That's actually a distraction thing and missed opportunities because of miscommunicated objectives, right? Realistic, then we have a problem. We're not disruptive, we're distracted by the thing that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in that piece, I'm wondering if you were the CIO and you write IT business and sorry, we dropped Adam. He got lost in the cloud. Let's see if I can add him back in here. You got lost in the cloud.
I was wandering.
Yeah, you were. You were like, that was such a good answer. Mic drop, boom. I'm out of here. So, my question was okay, like digging into that, if you walked in as a new CIO to an organization and there were two very clear silos, the business knows the business, IT knows IT.
Mhm.
What's the first step you would take to closing that gap between the two of them?
Building a relationship that is based on trust, right? Um, they need to, in that scenario, if I only know my side of the house and you only know yours, the only way that we're going to become effective is by having some type of a relationship where we trust each other in that. And that when you say, as the business, I need these things for these reasons, I need to trust that you understand your problem well enough to articulate it to me.
Mhm,
And then you need to trust that I know my technical environments well enough
mhm,
to be able to design a solution to your problem. So
mhm,
building that trust is the absolute key, because what actually ends up happening if you don't build that trust is the business will go hire their own developers for their own teams, and then
mhm,
they'll get into software that might be the software that IT runs, and they might create problems
mhm,
for themselves where I updated something and I broke it. Don't take away the function that I just built. You can't do that. There's no possible scenario where rolling back is an option, but I need you to fix the problem
mhm,
that I created. Um,
mhm.
that's born in the idea that the business doesn't trust IT to actually solve the problem that they had that they tried to solve for themselves,
Yeah,
right? So that
yeah,
trust in the relationship, I think, is key to being able to build that. And then you start to educate each other.
yeah. Yeah, those are again, things you can do today, and that's the point of this live is to take away some of these tactics that you're able to implement today. So I'm going to go over to this question from Avery, which I absolutely love. I love like tactical questions because so much of what we talk about in this industry is theory, is thought, right? And so Avery's question here is if your top three competitors were handed the exact same tools that you have, do you believe your team would outperform them? If so, what habits would give you that edge?
That's a fantastic question, and absolutely, our team would outperform any of our competition. I'm 100% certain of that, and it has nothing to do with the idea that our team has a wealth of experience and we know all things. Although we are very good and know lots and lots of things in the areas that we play well in. But what I think is the most important part is we have a leadership structure where um, our team trusts each other. That trust is built on the integrity that we all bring to the table, right? Every single person that works for the Confidential and all of the partners that we have involved in any of our projects come to the table with a trust in the leadership and an expression of leadership where we're
Mhm,
allowed to do things like fail and pick
mhm,
ourselves back up again, because our leadership allows us to fail quickly, identify the problems, and then be able to solve them again, right?
mhm,
Give it another shot. Try it. And if you fail, try again. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
mhm,
We trust each other to be able to rebuild together.
mhm,
Yeah. That way, there's nobody that assumes that if I drop the ball on something because I went and tried for it and missed, I have a problem on my hands. That's actually I'd rather have a miss and know that that path is
mhm.
closed now because we've missed,
Yeah.
than think it's open for fear of trying to go find out what's at the end of that trail. So for
Mhm,
me, those are the habits that give us the edge. That willingness to try, the willingness to fail, and then try again. That
mhm,
perseverance I think is really important. And then the honesty, integrity, and transparency that we operate with as an
mhm,
organization, absolutely non-negotiable in our
mhm,
business. So that's something is a really, really important piece of the puzzle for me. If we can't
mhm.
bring integrity to the conversation, then we can't earn our clients' trust.
No.
And if we can't earn our clients' trust, then we don't belong working for them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of different
I
things
mean,
that are bound up in that. But earning trust, especially in a client-facing organization, is the absolute key, because once it's gone, it never comes
mhm.
back.
Yeah. definitely can't rebuild that. It's trying, like, we have a lot of metal clients, and their stakes are high when it comes to their overall production because you can't unmelt metal, right? Like it's not possible. It's the rules of physics and matter, and that's something that we believe,
Mhm.
as far as trust. I think taking this question a little bit differently is a good question to ask yourself as an organization, because there's a big piece to unpack here when it comes to overall technology strategies. If your top three competitors were handed the exact same tools you have today, do you know the tools you have today? Do you have any idea what they're capable of today? If your competitors have those tools, would they be using them differently? Do you believe your team would outperform them? I would say 9 out of 10 leaders would say yes, absolutely. But do you actually know how you would outperform them? Do you know your processes? Are they mapped? Does your team understand them? Are they constantly being reviewed for efficiencies? And are you making sure that you are leading them to continue to innovate? And if so, what habits give you edge? What habits do give you edge, right? What habits can you scale across the organization that you believe are really working well in this sector that would work well in accounting or manufacturing or
Mhm.
finance or any place like that? This is a question that you really need to look at. And in our industry, especially for our bigger, large Fortune 100, Fortune 50 clients, we see this happen all the time because they're given a tool by one of the big four that's customized for them, and it's immediately in their competitor's pocket the next week, right? So they go against this all the time. And it's not about the tools, right? It's about how you perform as an organization. And that comes down to process, people, and strategy. And that's why we always begin with the strategy, because if you don't understand that piece, the tools are not going to save you no matter what happens. So this is such a great question too. Adam, any questions you want to end with over here? I know we've got a lot in here that we'll certainly go back and answer, but would love to pull anyone up that you want to end with.
Well, I don't know that there's any particular one, but I love this conversation as we start thinking about the role of leadership, the role of your organizational culture. And one of the things that I like to think about in the actual discussion of deploying technology is starting to think about what are your competitive advantages. And competitive advantages, especially sustainable competitive advantage, is something that your competition can't copy. They don't have that. It's impossible for them to take away from you. That's what makes it sustainable. And for me, when you start thinking about using technology more effectively, there aren't a ton of organizations whose technology, as it pertains to AI or ERP or whatever, is a competitive advantage. And if somebody's
Mhm.
going to tell, if I've had people say our technology is our competitive advantage, well, then your competitors already have that, right? That's available
Yeah.
to them as
No,
well.
it's not.
But understanding your,
Even if you customized it, it is available to them,
um,
so just to add.
yeah, and as I think about that, for me, it becomes how do we turn that competitive advantage internal as well? When you start thinking about the idea that I need to use technology more effectively to really gain something in the marketplace, it should enhance my competitive advantage. First and
Mhm.
foremost, that's a key component of the purpose. But I can turn that competitive advantage internally. One of the things that thanks there, Denver Renfro. You can't use AI as my competitive advantage. No, you can't. It belongs to everybody. ChatGPT technology is its own competitive advantage, but that's neither here nor there. For me, as I'm getting a little bit, I'm losing my train of thought here, so I'll try to regather it. if you if you're looking to implement technology more effectively internally, your competitive advantages can be turned towards that or against it. And if you turn it
Mhm.
towards it because you understand why you're using technology and what your organizational strengths are, then technology actually becomes an effective tool. Yeah. You mentioned the metals industry. One of the things
Mhm.
that a lot of organizations have in the metals industry as competitive advantages is the people that they have in their organization. Metals is one of those
Mhm.
industries that has
Yeah.
such an incredible longevity of
Great.
tenure, and
Mhm.
those people know that business inside and out. They eat, sleep, and
Mhm.
breathe it, um,
Mhm.
and that's an advantage. Your people are an advantage in that. Your culture becomes an advantage. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of different metals cultures, and they are all
Mhm.
unique
Mhm.
to their organization and how they compete because they have to be. They have to differentiate effectively in a space where, um, there are very few metrics that matter in metals. It's how fast can you get it to me, at what quality, and what price. If you don't have the answers to those questions and you're not the best in those things,
Uh-huh.
then you will lose out on those types of things just because of the commodity nature of it.
Mhm.
And your culture is what happens to be able to influence those most effectively.
Mhm.
How your people function as a group is your advantage in being able to deliver better quality more quickly at a better price.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think that brings us to a lot of these different questions that we have coming in. Again, thank you so much for all of these amazing questions. This is the point of this, to have some dialogue around what can be your competitive advantage or how you get back to those basics. Tabitha, thanks for joining us. Tabitha, how do you start building habits with folks on the shop floor when using the technology in that manufacturing environment? And a lot of times we
Yeah.
talk about, Jim in the on the manufacturing floor that has known how to do that. That's where Jim comes from, is the metals industry, because Jim has been there for 30 years and knows exactly how everything works, no matter if he's an operator of technology or actually on the shop floor. And a lot of times, we
Yeah.
see executives in these environments that would have no idea how to run these machines if they didn't have Jim, as the glue holding this together. So, Adam, I'll let you
Yeah.
tackle this one.
Uh, with engagement up front, yeah, that's the first part of it. The folks that are on the shop floor are the ones that are going to know the equipment and the manufacturing process best. It just is going to be that way because they see it inside and out. Not even their managers are going to know it better. Their managers are going to know how it's supposed to go, and then managers might know how it went when they had that job years ago.
Mhm,
But how it happens today is really what only the people on the shop floor know and understand. So when we're talking about building habits with folks on the shop floor to use technology in a manufacturing environment, pulling them into the conversation and saying, where are your challenges? Where can we get better? And then showing them. Yeah. People that work with their hands are going to be folks that need to feel things with their hands. Yeah. And so for me, as I'm engaging with folks on the shop floor, I want to know, what do you do? How do you do it? Why do you do it that way? And then I can understand. And as they start to see that I am seeking to understand, then that trust starts to gain that
mhm,
I actually have in mind for them also something that will fit what it is will do better for them. And then we are building a trusting relationship in that, okay, well, if you understand how I'm doing this, then you can understand why I need it this way.
mhm,
And then I can say, okay, I can understand why you need it that way, but I can also show you a way that might be able to take that why and enhance it.
mhm,
That way, because I need it this way, because that helps me identify my defects more quickly and
mhm,
effectively. And it's okay, what if I gave you something that would add to that ability to detect
mhm,
defects more quickly? Maybe even by moving that detection up a step,
mhm,
or by taking the previous steps that caused those defects, conducting a root cause analysis and figuring out where they're coming from to see what we can do to prevent them. Now I'm listening, now I'm engaging. And that's the piece of it when we start thinking about technology, is getting down to that answer of, what are we trying to accomplish and why, and helping people see that we're on the same side here.
mhm,
I am on trying to understand you so that I can give you something valuable.
Mhm.
You will, of course, run into the inevitable. I don't need anything
Mhm.
differently. Everything works perfectly the way that it works. And I'm actually talking to somebody, a friend of mine, out of London, that is having this challenge with the field service management module with a team that doesn't think that they need to put their time
Mhm.
in and track time to a job. Well, that actually is going to help us improve as an
Yeah.
organization. And one of the things that I've been thinking about in that space and really engaging and helping build that habit is start to leverage some of the things that are natural
Mhm.
human um, concepts, which is competition.
Mhm.
I think he should stack up another team and say they're using it and they are outperforming you 10-1, and you can't argue with that,
Mhm.
right? At that point, then they see it. You engage that competitive nature,
Mhm.
and you start to really gain in that. So seeing people where they're at is really an important piece
Mhm.
of it.
Yeah. I mean, to excavate that message, listening, right? A lot of times, especially as consultants, nobody's ever like, "Oh, I'm so excited. The consultants are here to talk to me about my job." Expect to be talked at. A lot of times, this layer of the organization doesn't often feel heard. So, starting those conversations in a safe way of like, what are your pain points? What areas in which do you feel like are going really well and going and meeting them where they are. Not, I know we talk a lot about engaging them in the process, being, those end users on the core team, understanding that they really have a representation there and understanding that you're building the technology for them. So that's, definitely something that is a great opportunity. And just a shameless plug for our my bite size live. Tabitha will actually be on there. She's a food and beverage expert, and if you know about processes in food and beverage, there's little other industries that can compare. So definitely follow my LinkedIn, follow Tabitha, and she'll be on bite size here in just a couple weeks. So let's go over to let's go to this one. AI is only an advantage if it enhances a process and or productivity. Most want to say that they use AI because it's the flavor of the week, not knowing or considering if it really helped or not.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a lot of different problems that type of logic creates for people. One of them is using AI for the sake of using AI, and getting really nothing out of it. Assuming that it doesn't actually create a problem for you,
Mm-hmm.
and something to be managed. Um, this happens in a lot of spaces. One of the great examples of this is hiring a big four consulting firm
Mm-hmm.
because they're the big four. Of course, they're smart. They're going to be able to do this. Right. Ask Boeing how that worked out for them, how much they actually gained from the beautiful dashboards that were built for them, and the extensive digital transformation. They made no extra
Mm-hmm.
money. They blew billions of
Mm-hmm.
dollars, and they still were unable to deliver on time, which was the key problem in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
right? So knowing what you're connecting to and why it is you're using technology, what process or productivity you seek to enhance, and why, and then thinking about how you actually deconstruct that and accomplish that goal is really the key to it. And then what you also have to be confident in and can't be afraid of is when somebody says, right, but AI is not the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Something else is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Technology isn't the answer to that. Something else is. One of my a simple example of this. I had a client who was seeking to improve their procurement process,
Mm-hmm.
and they had this need to have an absolutely absurd number of approvals, and a policy that they were requiring wet signatures on every
Mm-hmm.
piece of paper, on the same piece of paper for every level of approval. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to get that same piece of paper to everybody to have a wet signature. Their problem wasn't their process;
Mm-hmm.
it was their policy.
Mhm.
Technology wasn't going to help the idea that you had a policy that required a wet signature. You need to go back and fix that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's we started deconstructing that component of it. DocuSign, for example, is accepted by everybody.
Mhm.
So why is that not as good as your wet signature? Well, you start deconstructing it and you start saying, well, require wet signatures on everything because we found that we were having people who approved things more than once, and by approving invoices more than once,
Mhm.
we were paying the same invoices
Mhm.
multiple times.
Yeah.
All right, now we have the
Now
root of
we
the
have
problem
the
here, right?
problem. I
Your problem is
Yeah.
that you are not tracking your
Mhm.
invoices properly. We really got to the bottom of it, and you have this process over here that can be fixed. You also have this problem over here that is a hole in your process, and neither of those are technology problems.
Mhm.
Those are process problems. You don't have a stage gate in your ability to approve an invoice a single time. Now we can use technology to fix that. We can use a technology. It might even be an AI tool that's
Mhm.
whose sole purpose is to say, is this a duplicate invoice? Am I approving the same invoice
Mhm.
multiple times, and should I approve it or not? And now we have a solution to an actual problem, as opposed to, well, we're going to implement AI so that we can approve things more quickly and effectively, when I had no actual connection to the problem that I'm solving.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, that couldn't be more fundamental, and kind of as a good wrap up to this conversation, is really understanding what problem are you solving. It's not technology for technology's sake, and don't hide behind this is our competitive advantage, because it's simply not, right? Even if you have a customized system, technology is available to all people and all companies. It's about understanding what actually makes you efficient, what makes your customers buy from you, what makes your people stay, right? And
Mhm.
leveraging those pieces. So this has been such a great session. We really appreciate all the great comments. As a reminder, we do go live every Friday morning. Most of the time, we try to do it depending on our client travel schedule, and all of those different aspects. But we really appreciate all these amazing questions. I'll go back in here and make sure that we comment on all of these and leave behind some additional resource. Any final thoughts, Adam, before we close today?
Well, I love the conversation, of course, and the solution and search for your problem. Thank you for that, Jason. um, for me, the comment that Tabitha makes there, I think, is also something that deserves a bit more space.
Okay.
With food and beverage is one of those industries that has such a high level of need for
Mhm.
traceability and um, for defect and error detection,
Mhm.
right? Ask somebody in food and beverage what happens if somebody finds a piece of metal in their food, and you will know. You will know quickly
If
what
you know, you
happens.
know. Yeah.
Um, you know, and so for me, that quality detection, food and beverage is, I guess, near and dear to everybody's heart. We all eat, right? But at the end of the day, um, when we're thinking about how technology is enabling every industry and what happens when those things move along, there needs to be able to know that the piece of food that I am giving to somebody to eat, which may be a child, is safe for them to
Mhm.
eat, especially in an environment where food is manufactured,
Mhm.
is so incredibly important. And using technology can help enhance that, but using it the wrong way can really
Mhm.
cause more
Yeah.
problems. And when you start thinking about the speed at which technology comes out, being at the ground level, being able to detect exactly how it is that impact is being felt at the ground level is even more important,
Mhm.
because when you start to try to deploy technology in a space like food and beverage and you miss because you weren't listening to the person, the guy or the gal who is there watching the machine do its job,
Mhm.
and seeing where the gap is created, then you've started creating problems for your company, and the government will find you for
Mhm.
that, especially if there's a piece of metal in a
Mhm.
child's. food. So anyway, that was my last thought
Yeah,
on that.
absolutely. I mean, and that's how we leverage a lot of this AI is things like quality assurance. When people think AI, they think, robots running around your manufacturing floor. They think, Gen AI on the front end of your business. And a lot of times the AI we're working with is quality assurance, right? To make sure that you understand the
Yeah,
variances, those are detected more efficiently, but it all starts with really understanding the why. I want to make sure I am making food as carefully and as fast and possible, right?
as fast
That
as you
is my
carefully
number one.
can.
Yes, exactly. Um, and so I think that piece is really where you start that. And then you let the strategy drive the technology, not the other way around. And a lot of times, we see clients that are in a situation where either their incumbent vendor or they, some of their C-suite went to, some conference and got obsessed with something. And now all of a sudden we're letting technology drive where we shouldn't be letting it drive. We should be letting process and strategy drive. So this has been such a great conversation. We'd love to hear your feedback or your ideas of what you'd like us to talk about. We really try and drive value in these conversations. That's our goal. So you can always reach out to us directly, Kyler at theconfluential.com, Adam at theconfluential.com. Info@theconfluential.com is available to you as well, or DM us. We're always available in LinkedIn DMs as well. So thank you. Deep gratitude for all of your amazing comments today and this conversation. Thank you, Adam, for joining us and giving us an extra 6 minutes. Guarantee you're telling somebody else you're late for a meeting. So we appreciate your time. And to everyone, we will see you next week. Have a great weekend. And thank you again for joining us today.